Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Gender and Development Studies, SOGDS, Certificate Program, Certificate in Gender Agriculture and Sustainable Development, CGAS, MGS 041 Introduction to Gender, Agriculture and Sustainable Development, Block-2 Approaches to Gender and Development, Unit-8 GAD Indicators, 8.1 Introduction. To ensure that women and men will equally contribute and benefit from the economic, social, political, cultural, and environmental development of the country, appropriate measures must be undertaken to provide them with equal conditions for realizing their full rights to participate in the development process and at the same time gain from it. However, in many countries of the world, gender discrimination and resulting gender inequality in economic, social, and political spheres is a fact of life. They understand where, why, and how gender inequality arises is vital in addressing gender and development problems and issues. Efforts aimed at advancing the status of women require timely and accurate information on their situation compared to that of men. Gender disaggregated data and statistics are needed to enhance women's and men's awareness and capabilities, leading to greater participation, decision-making, power, and control. 8.2 Objectives. After studying this unit, you should be able to times analyze the linkage between gender and development, times discuss gender indicators including gender-related development indicators, GDI, and gender empowerment measure, GEM, and times describe UNESCAP's framework for measuring progress on the 12 critical areas of the Beijing Platform for Action. 8.3 Background to GAD Indicators. Conventional development indicators are economic growth, rise in national and per capita income and GDP, the rapid pace of urbanization, high mobility of labor and capital, expansion of the industrial base, agrarian growth and growth of foreign trade. Gender economists have challenged this thinking as these indicators have not considered just the distribution of resources, opportunities, and material well-being to most human beings, especially women. This resulted in the development of the Women in Development approach, which signifies awareness about the marginalization of women in society in general and in the economy in particular. Towards Equality Report, Government of India published in 1974 and the UN Charter on Equality, Development and Peace adopted in 1975 were influenced by this approach. It is also worth noting that the Women and Development approach that believes in the integration of women in the mainstream through education, health and economic development of women is a guiding force for National Perspective Plan, 1988 to 2000. GOI, the Gender and Development approach is committed to bending the existing power structure in favor of women through women's empowerment in the apex bodies of decision-making. Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, espouses this approach. The four Global Women's Conferences, Mexico 1975, Copenhagen 1980, Nairobi 1985 and Beijing 1995 were instrumental in bringing women's issues center stage in the country after country by raising awareness, spreading ideas, creating important alliances, and increasing confidence. These conferences also provided the mandate for CEDAW, the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which was in turn responsible for the creation of UNIFEM, the UN Development Fund for Women, and INSTRO, the UN International Research and Training Institute for the Advancement of Women. In addition, MDGs Gender Inclusive 2000, INSTRON, Visibility of Women in Statistics and Indicators, 1988, GDI, and GEM by the United Nations, and development radars developed by various countries, including India, interdistrict, interstate, and cross-country comparisons of women's empowerment are obtained from Gender-Related Development Index, GDI. GDI owes its origin to its precursor, the HDI, Human Development Index, three main components: per capita income, educational attainment, and life expectancy, a proxy for health attainment. Gender disparities are measured, keeping these three indicators into consideration. An additional measure, Gender Empowerment Measure, GEM, has been formulated to take into account aspects relating to economic participation and decision-making by women. The indicators used in GEM are income share, share in parliamentary seats, and an index that includes a share in administrative and managerial jobs and share in professional and technical posts. 8.3.1 Meaningful Indicators of Women and Development, comparative data of 130 countries regarding gender-related development, Index, GDI, reveals that gender equality does not depend entirely on the income level of society. The human development approach, which focuses on demographic, health, educational, and human rights profiles, have revealed that there is an urgent need to re-examine this approach by conducting participatory action research and rapid rural appraisal not by social scientists alone, but in collaboration with other professionals such as scientists, doctors, occupational health and safety experts, engineers and lawyers who believe that, like them, citizens from subsistence sector also have right to enjoy fruits of modern science and technology in terms of food security, safe transport, clean environment, secure housing and healthy life. India ranks 114 in GDI and 134 in the HDI in the year 2008 to 2009 as the Indian women enjoy nearly 1/5 of the total earned income, life expectancy of 63.4 years, female 64.9, male 62, and 66% adult literacy, female 54.5%, male 76.9%, rate and combined primary, secondary and tertiary gross enrollment ratio, GAD, of 61%, female 57.4% and male 64.3%. HDI for India is 0.612 and GDI for India is 0.594. As compared to their male counterparts, women in India have higher life expectancy because women from the middle and upper classes live in a secure environment, produce 1 or 2 children and control food, kitchen, of the household. 8.4 While look at gender and indicators, because what is measured is more likely to be prioritized and evidence gathered against indicators can help make the case that gender issues should be taken seriously. Indicators can be used for advocacy and can help make a case for action by highlighting key issues backed up with statistics and other evidence. They enable better planning and actions. Gender indicators can be used to evaluate the outcomes of gender-focused and mainstream interventions and policies and help reveal barriers to achieving success. They can provide vital information for adjusting programs and activities to achieve gender equality goals and do not create adverse impacts on women and men. They can also be used to measure gender mainstreaming within organizations. They can be used for holding institutions accountable for their commitments to gender equality. Gender indicators and relevant data can make visible the gaps between the commitments many governments and other institutions have made at all levels, for example, by ratifying the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, and their actual implementation and impact. They can be used to hold policymakers accountable for their actions or lack of action. They can help to stimulate change through data collection processes. For example, discussions in focus groups or individual interviews can help raise awareness of particular issues. They can stimulate discussion and inspire recognition among participants of everyday experiences related to sensitive topics such as GBV. 8.5 The Millennium Development Goals, MGS proposed by the UN Millennium Summit of September 2000 affirmed the international community's commitment to gender equality and women's empowerment. The third of the MDGs addresses gender equality specifically. Gender advocates and policymakers agreed that the achievement of this goal depended on the extent to which other goals addressed gender-based constraints. The Millennium Project Task Force on Gender and Education advocated the case for developing gender indicators for each of the MDGs. See box, MDGs and the importance of gender equality. Goal 1. Eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, times equal access for women too. Essential transport and energy infrastructure can lead to more significant economic activity, times investment in women's health and nutritional status reduces chronic hunger and malnourishment, which increases productivity and well-being. Goal 2. Achieve universal primary education, times educated girls and women have greater control of fertility and participate more in times a mother's education are a strong, consistent of her children's and attainment and their health and nutrition outcomes. Goal 3. Promote gender equality and empower women. This central goal dedicated to gender equality and women's empowerment depends on achieving all other goals for its success. Goal 4. Reduce child mortality times a mother's education, income, and empowerment have a significant impact on lowering child mortality. Goal 5. Improve maternal health times a mother's education, income, and empowerment have a significant impact on lowering maternal mortality. Goal 6. Combat HIV/AIDS, malaria, and other diseases. Greater economic independence for women, increased ability to negotiate safe sex, and more awareness of challenges around traditional norms in sexual relations are essential for preventing the spread of HIV/AIDS and other epidemics. Goal 7. Ensure environmental sustainability times gender equitable property and resource ownership policies. Enable women, often as primary users of these resources, to manage them in a more sustainable manner. Goal 8. Develop a global partnership for development times greater gender equality in the political sphere may lead to higher investments in development cooperation, adapted from Groen et al. 8.6 Examples of gender indicators. There have been a few significant attempts at developing indicators for measuring gender-related issues. Of these, 3 important ones are discussed here. 8.6.1 UNDP's GDI and GEM. On the occasion of the UN World Conference in Beijing, the UNDP Human Development Bureau prepared and released the Human Development Report, 1995, subtitled Gender and Human Development. The report highlighted the disparities among men and women in various indicators of human development around the world. The report's most important contribution is introducing two unique indices for measuring gendered inequality, the GDI, Gender-Related Development Index, and the GEM, Gender Empowerment Measure. 8.6. The Gender-Related Development Index, GDI. In 1995, the UNDP brought out the Gender-Related Development Index as a method for assessing gender inequality. The variables used in GDI are similar to those used for the Human Development Index, these being education, health and income. While the HDI measures average achievement, the GDI adjusts the average achievement to reflect the inequalities between men and women in the following dimensions, times a long and healthy life, as measured by life expectancy at birth, times knowledge as measured by the adult literacy rate and the combined primary, tertiary and gross enrollment ratio, times a decent standard of living, as measured by estimated earned income, PPP as $8.6.3. The Gender Empowerment Measure, GEM, focusing on women's opportunities rather than their capabilities. The GEM captures gender inequality in 3 key areas, times political participation and decision making power are measured by women's and men's percentage share of parliamentary seats, times economic participation and decision-making power, as measured by 2 indicators, women's and men's percentage shares of positions as legislators, senior officials and managers, and women's and men's percentage share of professional and technical positions times power over economic resources as measured by women's and men's estimated earned income PPP as dollar. Box 1. Some facts from the Human Development Report 2009. HDR 2009 ranks 155 countries on a global scale in terms of their GDI. It is clear from the GDI estimates that women enjoy the same opportunities as men in no society. The top rank is enjoyed by Australia with a GDI value of 0.966 compared with the maximum possible value of 1.000 showing perfect equality. Most countries with a high GDI are also countries with high HDI since GDI is discounted for gender inequality, HDI. Meaning not all countries with high human development have small gaps in their HDI and GDI ranks. It is -9 for Austria, -6 for USA, Kuwait and UAE, -5 in case of Ireland and Luxembourg, which are among the very high human development list. Among high human development list, Saudi Arabia is worst at -7. Among medium human development countries, Jordan and Syrian Arab Republic has -8, and none of the low human development countries have less than -1. Therefore, as mentioned by the HDR 1995, income is not the decisive factor. The decision to invest in the health and education of people, irrespective of gender, seems to cut across income levels, political ideologies, cultures, and stages of development. The report also ranks the countries on their GEMs, 109 countries for which data is available. The top 4 countries in this list are in the Nordic belt: Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, in that order. This is hardly surprising. These countries have adopted gender equality and women's empowerment as conscious national policies to end the relative deprivation of women. GEM brings out the gender inequity more sharply. Japan, with only 12% women in industrial positions and a similar percentage of women in parliament and 0.45 as the ratio of estimated female to male earned income, which are some of the components of GEM, has the dubious distinction of having the 57th rank in terms of GEM in spite of a much higher rank for HDI, 10th. A similar dismal situation is shared by some other countries, such as Ireland, 22nd and 5th, the Republic of Korea, 61st and 26th, Qatar, 88 GAD Indicators 8th and 33rd, Saudi Arabia, 106th and 59th. On the other hand, a relatively low-income country such as Trinidad and Tobago shows a high GEM rank of 14 while on the 64th position in terms of HDI. Similar examples include the Philippines, 59, 105, Kyrgyzstan, 56, 120, South Africa, 26, 129, etc. Source: UNDP, 2009, Human Development Report, 8.6.4 Critique of GDI and GEM. The GDI has been criticized for failing to consider important aspects such as the quality of community life, human rights, and access to basic amenities. Issues as violence against women or restrictions placed on women's capacity to be mobile or household allocation of resources do not reflect the GDI. Income or education levels cannot fully capture the specific disadvantages experienced by women. Recognizing the importance of gender-based power imbalances, the UNDP has recognized that movement to gender equality is a political process. For this, the gender empowerment measure has been formulated to reflect variables that consider women's political participation, their access to professional positions, and their earning power. The GEM is also criticized because it is based only on 3 variables and, therefore, defines empowerment very narrowly. It ignores legal and human rights and does not consider cultural constructions and related practices that disempower women. The GEM has also been criticized because its components were related to characteristics of power more appropriate to the developed countries. The argument was that there would not be professional associations of women, and there would be few women in parliament in developing countries. Still, in these countries, participation of women in other types of organizations, such as cooperatives, trade associations, and community organizations may indicate empowerment which is not reflected in the statistics on which GEM is based. It has been argued that the majority of women in underdeveloped countries are doing work that is invisible to valuation in the mainstream male-defined world of statistics relating to work and income. Therefore, the GDI and GEM indices based on per capita income and work participation rates are not accurate for developing countries. 8.7 UNESCAP's framework for measuring progress on the 12 critical areas of the Beijing Platform for Action. In October 1999, ESCAP, the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific of the UN, United Nations, organized the high-level intergovernmental meeting to review regional implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action. The meeting was convened to review the progress made and the obstacles encountered in implementing the 12 critical areas of the Platform for Action. Subsequently, at its 23rd special session entitled Women 2000, Gender Equality, Development and Peace for the 21st Century, Beijing 5, the General Assembly adopted a political declaration and an outcome document on further actions and initiatives to implement the platform. The political declaration recognized that governments have primary responsibility for implementing the 12 critical areas of concern. The platform recommends explicitly designing gender-sensitive indicators with particular reference to poverty, economic activity, and violence. Governments agreed to regularly assess the further implementation of the platform to bring together in 2005 all parties involved to assess progress and consider new initiatives. In this context, the need for a roadmap of indicators to inform policymakers on the progress or reverses in the situation of women in the countries was acutely felt. A set of guidelines for developing gender-based indicators, both quantitative and qualitative, in the ESCAP region was developed and proposed by the expert group that met for this purpose from December 2 to 4, 2002, intending to provide accurate measurements of change in the situation of women occurring over time and for comparisons between countries in the region. The proposed indicators are briefly explained below. 8.7.1 Women and Poverty. Important indicators. Times population below the national poverty line, percentage, times population living on less than $1 per day, percentage, times public assistance beneficiary rate, percentage, by sex, times female-headed households below poverty line, percentage, times policies and programs supporting female household heads with low income, yes-no, key features, times legislation ensuring equal inheritance rights to women, yes-no, key features and enforcement situation, times legislation ensuring equal property ownership rights to women, yes-no, key features and enforcement situation, times credit programs for women in poverty, yes-no, key features, times policies and programs on gender-based research on poverty, including social security systems, yes-no, key features, times production and distribution of sex disaggregated statistics on poverty, yes-no, list key statistics. 8.7.2 Education and training of women, important indicators, times gender difference in average years of schooling, by sex, times gross and net enrollment ratio, percentage, by sex, level of education, times female students in tertiary education, percentage by field of education, times ratification of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, yes-no, year of ratification, times adult illiteracy rate, percentage, by sex, age group, rural-urban, times vocational training enrollment rate, percentage by sex. Field of study, times policies and programs for women in science and technology, yes, no, key features, times women in information and communication technology, ICT, percentage by industry, level, times access to computers, internet, percentage by sex, urban-rural, times national programs to reduce gender stereotypes in school curricula and textbooks, yes, no, key features, 8.7.3 women and health, important indicators, times life expectancy at birth, by sex, times calorie intake, by sex, age, group, times pregnant women with anemia, percentage, times deliveries attended by skilled health personnel, percentage, times maternal mortality rate, percentage, times induced abortion rate, percentage, times contraception practice rate, percentage, by sex, methods, times health education for women, yes, no, times gender-sensitive policies and programs to prevent HIV/AIDS, yes, no, key features, times medical research fund for women's health issues, percentage of total, key features, 8.7.4 violence against women, important indicators, times incidences of domestic violence, per 100,000 people, graph of reported and convicted cases, times incidences of sexual violence, per 100,000 people, graph of reported and convicted cases, times legislation against gender-based violence, yes, no, types of violence, covered and enforcement situation, times support system for female victims of violence, yes, no. List available, services and budget, times production of statistics on gender-based violence, yes, no, list key, statistics, times fund for research on violence against women, yes, no, amount of funds, times ratification of international conventions on trafficking in and enslavement of people, yes, no, year of ratification, times legislation combating sex tourism and trafficking of women, yes, no, key features and enforcement situation, times incidences of prostitution and trafficking, numbers of cases filed and convicted, times services for female victims of exploitations by prostitution and trafficking, yes, no, key features, 8.7.5 women and armed conflict, important indicators, times women in peace-related decision-making, percentage. Background of women, times policies and programs ensuring women's participation in the peace process, yes, no, key features, times ratification of the Convention on Prohibitions or Restrictions on the Use of Certain Conventional Weapons, which may be deemed to be excessively injurious, and the Protocol on Prohibitions or Restrictions on the Use of Mines, booby traps, and other devices, yes, no, year of ratification, times military expenditure, percentage of the total government expenditure, and GDP. Times ratification of Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, yes, no, year of ratification, times policies and programs preventing human rights abuses of women in conflict situation, yes, no. Key features, times gender-sensitive peace education, yes, no, key features of program and participants, times programs for refugee and displaced women, yes, no. Key features, 8.7.6 women and the economy, important indicators, times labor force, economic participation and unemployment rates, percentage by sex, times policies and programs to implement the 1993 United Nations System of National Accounts, SNA, yes, no, key features, times equal employment opportunity law and legislation ensuring equal pay for work of equal value and legislation for prevention of sexual harassment at workplace, yes, no. Key features and enforcement situation, times programs to enhance women's income generating potential and to support women entrepreneurs, yes, no, by rural, urban, key features, times vocational training, counseling and placement services for women, yes, no, the percentage received service by sex, by training, times legislation protecting women in the informal sector, yes, no, coverage, times ratification of ILO conventions, yes, no, list ratified conventions and year of ratification, times women in managerial positions, percentage. By occupation and subsector, times participation of women in labor unions. Percentage, by position, times lengths of paid maternity leave, days, list state and public payment, provisions, 8.7.7 Women in power and decision making, important indicators, times women in parliament, percentage. Times women in ministerial posts, percentage, times women in political parties, percentage by the level of position, times women in government committees, percentage, times women in central government, percentage, by rank, times women in local government, percentage, by rank, elected non-elected, times affirmative action for women in political parties, yes no, key features, times women voters, percentage, times training for women political candidates and for female government officials, yes no, key features, times. Leadership training for women in NGOs, trade unions and business organizations, yes no, list programs, 8.7.8 Institutional mechanisms for the advancement of women, important indicators. Times national machinery for women's advancement and gender equality, yes no, by level, list mandates, numbers of staff and budget, times gender focal points in different ministries, yes no, level of position, list, mandates, times gender, sensitivity training for government officials, yes no, key features, times institutionalization of gender analysis of government policies, yes no, times interministerial gender policy coordinating body, yes no, key features, including mandates, times gender caucus in the Parliament, yes no, key features including mandates, times publication of gender statistics and indicators regularly, yes no, specify the type of publication, times time use survey, yes no. Year of survey, 8.7.9 Human rights of women, important indicators, times ratification of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, and optional protocols, yes no, year of ratification, number of reservations to CEDAW, number, list articles paragraphs and reservations removed, times legislation protecting women's human rights, yes no, key features and enforcement situation, times national action plans to protect women's human rights, yes no, key features, including monitoring mechanisms, times National Commission on Human Rights, yes no, existence of women's division, percentage of women commissioners, times revision of gender discriminatory laws following CEDAW, yes no. List, revised laws, times gender, sensitivity training for people in legislative, judiciary and law enforcement system, yes no, key features, times legal literacy education for women, yes no, list measures taken to ensure women at the grassroots are included, times education on women's human rights. Yes no, list measures taken to ensure women at the grassroots are included. 8th July 2010 Women and the media, important indicators, times women professionals in electronic and print media, percentage, by type, of media, level of position, women in decision-making positions, times training for women in new communication technologies, yes no, list, measures taken to ensure women at the grassroots are included. Times media literacy education for women and the general public, yes no, times institutionalization of gender sensitivity training for media professionals, yes no, times legislation against pornography, violence, the portrayal of women as sex objects, and commercial exploitation in media, yes no, key features, including monitoring mechanisms, times codes of conduct and guidelines on the balanced portrayal of women, yes no, key features including monitoring mechanisms, times support for women's media. Monitoring activities, yes no, key features including the level of funding, 8.7.11 Women and the environment, important indicators, times women in environmental decision-making bodies, percentage. By types, times leadership training for women on environmental and resource management, yes no, list key features and measures taken to ensure women at the grassroots are included, times gender analysis of environmental policies and programs, yes no, times programs promoting women's role in environmentally sound production, yes no, list programs, times database of women's indigenous knowledge on resource management and environment preservation, yes no, key features, times implementation of chapter 24 of Agenda 21, yes no, monitoring, mechanisms, 8th July 2012 The Girl Child, important indicators, times legislation ensuring equal inheritance rights of the girl child, yes no, times legislation ensuring the minimum legal age for marriage, yes no. Key features and enforcement situation, times sex ratio at birth, by birth order, times policies to promote girls' access to education, yes no, list key features, times infant and under age 5 mortality rate per 1000 live births by sex, times an infant with low birth weight and malnutrition of children under 5% by sex, times education for girls and boys on sexual behavior and reproductive health, yes no, times children aged between 10 and 14 in employment, percentage by sex, times legislation preventing child abuse, female infanticide, prenatal sex, selection, incest, child prostitution, and child pornography, yes no, key features and enforcement situation, times parental education and counseling on gender-sensitive parenting. Yes no, 8.8 Social Institutions and Gender Index, CG, developed by the OECD's Gender, Institutions and Development Database. The OECD introduced the Gender, Institutions and Development Database, GIDDB, on International Women's Day 2006 to determine and analyze obstacles to realizing gender equality. The CG was constructed as a new measure of gender equality. At the same time, the conventional indicators focused on inequality outcomes. The CG measures inequalities based on social institutions like norms, traditions, and informal laws. The Index of Social Institutions is a tool for capturing the underlying reasons for the gender gaps in 102 non-OECD countries. The CG has introduced 12 indicators on social institutions, which are grouped into 5 categories: family code, physical integrity, son, preference, civil liberties, and ownership rights. Family code includes institutions that influence the decision-making power of the women in the household. Times early marriage measures the percentage of girls between the ages of 15 and 19 who are married, divorced, or widowed. This indicates forced or arranged marriages as a gender-related variable. Times polygamy refers to the acceptance within a society of men having multiple wives. Times parental authority measures whether women have the same rights to be legal guardians of their children and whether they have custody rights after divorce. Times inheritance measures whether widows and daughters have equal rights. As is, physical integrity consists of 2 variables on violence against women. Times violence against women measures the existence of legal protection for women against rape, assault, and sexual harassment. Times female genital mutilation measures the extent and incidences of this practice. Son preference measures gender bias in mortality due to sex-selective abortions and inadequate care given to girls. Civil liberties refers to the freedom of social participation of women. Times freedom of movement measures the restrictions women face in moving freely outside their household without being escorted by male family members. Freedom of dress measures the obligations to observe a certain dress code in public. Ownership rights include 3 variables: times women's access to land, times women's access to property other than land, times women's access to a credit. 8.9 Summary. The choice of what to measure will be different for different actors. Governments might be concerned with monitoring progress for women and men. Development agencies might evaluate the impact of their gender programs, while gender equality activists may be measuring gender inequality or injustice. A good practice when developing indicators, although there is often a temptation to apply universal templates and frameworks simply, it is vital to adapt indicators to be relevant. To be meaningful and illuminating, indicators need to be derived in consultation with local people and reflect the gender context of a particular region, country, or community. Indicators should take into account statutory and customary laws, as well as reflecting how gender inequalities are experienced and expressed. Only then can they convey meaningful change for the people involved in or being affected by the donor policy. Key questions to be asked when designing gender indicators. Some questions that should be asked in the design and review stages of developing gender indicators include: times, what change do you want to see? What would success look like? How will people's gender or sexuality affect the way they understand and experience these changes? Times, who should be involved in defining the vision of change, determining the indicators and gathering data? Times, are there existing national indicators that could be used or adapted? Times, what legal frameworks exist that may enable or inhibit gender equality? For example, does national law prohibit violence against women or GBV? More broadly, these frameworks can provide the basis for indicators. Times, has CEDAW and its optional protocol been ratified? If so, this can offer a framework for developing indicators. Times, what information already exists or is being collected, assisting in tracking changes? What relevant research and reports on the indicator already exist? If there is no data, what does that tell you, and where might you look? Times, do partner governments have the political will to undertake data collection around the gender indicators selected? And were they consulted in the formulation of the indicators? Do they have the capacity to collect data? Times, how can you ensure small changes will be measured? There is increasing pressure on donors to manage for results, to demonstrate significant changes in a fixed period. It is, however, essential to consider which indicators could capture the often small, nuanced shifts in gender equality that tends to happen over time. Times, how will the data collected be analyzed and disseminated? And how will the results be used for learning and feedback into program project, learning and design recommendations? Times, identify the objectives and goals, your vision of change. This should be the basis for choosing appropriate gender indicators against which to track progress. Times, consider a combination of qualitative and quantitative data to generate richer data. Times, use participatory approaches wherever possible, including in defining gender indicators. Times, use gender indicators to assess the outcomes and impacts of gender mainstreaming. Times, support and strengthen local statistics offices to produce gender-responsive data. Times, make regular gender evaluations or internal audits mandatory. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.